Are we good to go? Okay, so welcome everyone to the Flutter Vikings 2022. Come on, give it up for everyone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know what you think, but I'm really excited right now because it's been 3 years since the in-person event that we had in Warsaw. And right now, seeing everyone that I know from the internet, it feels unreal right now. So thank you very much for being here. So we will have a couple of points that we would like to share with you. First things first, everyone is welcome here. So please be nice to everyone. Please be inclusive. Do not say anything that you wouldn't want to hear. And just be friendly, be open, and be open for discussions as well with your peers. So check the code of conduct on the website. And we don't have any tolerance to breaking the code of conduct or just be nice. That's all I'm saying. Another point is, as you might realize, if you're in person, we are in the Felix Conference Center. We have 3 rooms. You're in one of them now. So it's Valhalla, Thor, and Odin. And 2 of them are in this floor, and one of them is 1 level below. So you can check it out. Also, be sure to engage with the others in between the talks and just check out the sponsored booths that I will be talking about in a second. Also, the folks in the live stream, welcome again, because this wouldn't be a big conference without you being here. So thank you very much for being a part of this. And the event is right now live streamed on 3 different streams on Flutter YouTube channels, like Flutter community YouTube channel. So check out all the videos later on or right now, whenever you feel at your own convenience. So if you're wondering about the program, I'm sure you already checked it several times, but be sure to check out the website, fluttervikings.com. Go ahead and download the application from Google Play Store or Apple App Store, and just put the talks that you want to see onto the favorites list, and you will receive a notification whenever you have a talk. So just be mindful about the program and just don't miss anything. And we will have a lot of gifts and giveaways, and we have a lot of activities. Go ahead and check them out on the app and website as well. We will have more than $10,000 worth of prizes to give away. So be in the stream, be in person, and just engage with the community, and you will be rewarded for that. And for getting the prize, especially this goes to the folks at the live stream, just have your ticket reference with you. If you already printed out your badge, you might be seeing, you might be seeing your reference number on the right down side of your ticket or your badge. But if you don't see it, you can also see it on your email on your ticket as well. So today we are actually celebrating great news. We have released Flutter 3.3 yesterday. So give it up for the Flutter team, everyone. Yeah, there has been so many improvements that I've seen, especially if you do some apps on web and desktop. I'm sure you will be happy with selectable text, I guess. And the Go router improvements were also really cool. So go ahead and check it out and share what you think about it. And this event wouldn't be possible without the sponsors. I mean, this wouldn't be possible without Majid, of course, but without the sponsors, we couldn't make it into realization. So thank you very much, Flutter, Invertase, Stream, AppWrite, CodeMagic, AdSign, Superlist, AWS Amplify, Rebel App Studios, Very Good Ventures, Software, Dev Angels London, Bouvet, Olaf Stoppen, Talsec, Sentry, Microsoft, OneSignal, Somnio, Cloudinary, LeanCode, and Tide. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support on the community, because you made this into realization. Thank you. So enjoy Flutter Vikings, everyone. It's really amazing to be here. And today's first talk will be about actually my favorite topic, animations. And we have Roa Khaddam to talk about take your Flutter animations to the next level. Come on, give it up for Roa. regular? Do you have a regular mic or only this one? Okay. Okay. So. There you go.
I hope I don't take long. Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the wait, a lot of technical issues. Thank you all for being here, for choosing Thor, and for the people online, thank you for tuning in as well. I'm so excited to meet everyone in person. I know all of your avatars, but seeing you in person is really amazing. So let me tell you a little bit about myself first. My name is Ru'a Khaddam. I'm a software engineer. I've been working with Flutter for 3 years now, and during those 3 years, I co-founded an agency where we built client solutions, digital solutions for clients, including, of course, Flutter mobile applications. And during those 3 years, I saw a lot of, I was the mobile development team lead, and I saw a lot of mobile applications go into production with great user experience and great user interactivity. And during creating those applications, aside from that, I always had a passion for animation. I had tinkered before with motion graphics and web animations. So when I started working with Flutter, I immediately discovered how amazing it is with animations and that there are absolutely no limits to the animation that you can create with it. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about, of course. And before we get into the technical stuff, I want to tell you a little story. This is a designer, a UI UX designer. He was tasked by a very demanding client to build a highly interactive, creative UI animation that, the client wants it to pop. So after a lot of work and client feedback, the designer came up with this prototype. Okay, it's loading. It's longer than I expected. So at the end, okay, that's. Okay, at the end, spoiled. At the end, the designer was happy, the client was happy, but the developer, of course, was scared to death. But fear not, we're going to see today how all of the components in this animation can be built with Flutter and what it takes, all the concept that it takes to build it. And this is the final outcome. Okay, not the final. This is the agenda for our talk. It will include talk about, I see my screen here and here, and I'm looking here. I don't know why. Okay. So we're going to explore scrolling animations, like what Flutter provides capabilities of scrolling with lists, grids, and slivers. We will also see complex hero animations, as you remember from the demo. And we're going to use a gyroscope effect to animate a pattern, and we will do an alternative for non-gyroscope available devices. And the final outcome will be this. Well, I'm both the designer and the developer in this case, so this is actually the Flutter application with a little bit of After Effects work. So don't judge me. Okay, we will go a step further than the client and the designer, and we will make it look great on desktop and web. And it's not live. Okay. This is how it looks on web. You can see that the list is actually a grid, and we have the same effects. And it's responsive. And instead of a gyroscope, we have an effect of following the mouse pointer. And the hero animations are the same. Okay, first, we're going to talk about animating the scroll view and how it will look like this. As you may know, list views, grid views, and page views, anything that is a scroll view in Flutter has an item builder parameter, or in the case of custom scroll view, all the slivers. They all have the behavior of being built right when they come into the screen and being disposed when they leave the view, the scroll view. And this actually is perfect for doing this animation, because all we have to do is like run an animation in the init state method, and it will run when it goes into the screen and then run again. Unless, of course, you want it to run once. However, in this case, I usually like to use a child wrapper widget, wrap it around my item builder children, and do the animation inside of it. This way I can like reuse it with other lists and so on. And I can use the automatic keep alive client mixin and provide it the value from the widget parameter to make the animation run only once, not always, and we will see that later. So the recipes list actually is a grid view for responsiveness. It has like the cross-access count, or the rows the items per row are like 1 for mobile and 3 for desktop, so we don't have to worry about it. But a list view would work exactly the same. We have the recipe list item wrapper widget that runs the animation. And before we go into it, if you might notice that the animation runs for each item as soon as it's built. However, it's different when the direction of the scroll is reversed. So for that, we can have multiple ways of doing that. I'm going to use a notification listener around the grid view that listens to the scroll direction, forward or reverse direction, and we will use a value notifier to avoid set state and reduce rebuilds. And we're going to pass it down to the item wrapper that has the animation. And inside the animation widget, if you ignore a little bit the animated builder widget, I will talk about it a little bit. We have just simply 2 transform widgets, one for perspective, like the 3D effect, and one for scaling up. And the perspective is like, it's nothing 3D actually. It's scaling down the items as on the specific axis by using an identity 4x4 matrix with X and Y and Z axes. If you change the alignment, the start of the perspective scaling down will change, and if you like use a negative value, it will scale down upwards or in reverse. So that's what we're going to apply now using the scroll direction. But let me give you a little bit of introduction about Flutter Animations in case you're not familiar with them. They're like 2 kinds of animations in Flutter: implicit and explicit animations. Implicit animations are the simplest form, the easiest, like animated foo widget, where foo stands for like the animated property, like animated padding or animated rotation, or the animated container that like has all its values can be animated. The animation is triggered simply by assigning a value to the widget and changing this value with a set state, for example, and the animation is triggered. You can also use a tween animation builder widget that we actually use in this demo in case you don't like find a widget that has the same purpose of animation that you like to use. You give it a tween class. The tween simply provides a begin and end value to animate between, and its builder method rebuilds as the animation is running, which gives you the same effect of an implicit animation. Okay, and the second type is explicit animations. We saw them earlier in the child widget of the list items. It simply uses an animation controller to tell the animation to explicitly animate, how and when to animate. And the animation controller lives by being hooked to Flutter's 60 frame per second ticker. We can use that. We can access that by using the single ticker provider state mixin, for example, and assigning it to the animation controller. Okay, let's go back now to the animated builder widget. It's a type of explicit animations for when you want like to have multiple properties when there is no transition widget that fits your purpose. And the animation builder simply like takes the animation controller and rebuilds its builder as the controller is running. So you can either use the animation controller value inside the builder, or you can create your own animations like we're doing here. And we're going to see how we did that in a little bit. To use the scroll direction to define how our animations are going to run, like perspective animation and the alignment here, we have, if the scroll direction is forward, like I think it's when you're down and going up, it's forward, and reverse is going down. I'm not sure. It took a lot of trial and error to find it, but it works this way. I won't touch it. So now let's see actually the code. That would be a lot easier to. Okay, not this one. Okay. This is our list item wrapper widget. It takes the child, the keep alive to define if you want it to run only once, and the scroll direction that we passed from the notification listener. We defined here our scale animation and perspective animation and alignment animation. And we hooked them to our animation controller by doing the twin class and attaching it to the animation controller. And we made the scale animation run finish halfway through the animation. Now this actually is called Staggered Animations, and they are Flutter's way to overlap animations hooked to the same controller, so you don't have to like do more complicated and multiple animation controllers. You just simply use an interval class with a start and end value ranging between 0 and 1. And if the duration of the controller is a second and the interval is from 0 to 0.5, it's half a second, and so on. So we use that. We're going to see this actually in this animation. If you see here, when they animate in, they animate one after another. I'm using the same method of wrapping every list item with a wrapper. However, I'm providing it with an interval start of item index divided by item count and achieving this animation simply. So now let's start with the hero animation we see here. It's actually, if you notice, the GIF is not making it easier. Okay. If you notice the square behind it and the image itself and the title and description, they're all animating in the second page. Let me show you live. So the thing is like when I scroll down, there's this animation. And when I want to like return back, I want it to stay in the same rotation when I pop. So that's going to complicate things. The hero animations in Flutter by default support clipping and support changing size, but the rotation is a bit more complicated, but not so complicated. And I'm actually using a fade transition for the page transition to avoid like having it swipe in the screen with the default behavior to make the hero animation smoother. And I'm using a recipe image widget that it's used everywhere in the list item, in the page, and if you remember, the page has a sliver app bar in the mobile view. So it's the same widget used in all those places. And it simply has to have the same tag to work. And the child widget tree has to be optimally, if it's the same, the hero animation would be perfect. And this is the transform rotate with the rotation value that we're going to talk about in a minute. However, before that, let's talk about how we did actually the rotating while scrolling down. If you remember, we listened to the scroll direction with a notification listener earlier. This time we're going to use a scroll controller, attach a listener to it, and listen to the direction and change a value notifier according to the scroll position, and reverse it when the scroll position is reversed. So it's like when it's forward, it rotates in a direction. When it's reversed, it rotates in another direction. I actually have to like find you an item with a long list. Okay, the fluffy cake has an. Okay, that's better. So it reverses direction, and when you pop, of course, it doesn't like snap to return to the previous hero widget. And that is provided by doing the rotation angle. I'm going to show it to you. Okay. If you go to the list item where we do the navigation to the second page, you see that or first in the recipe page, we send back the rotation value. For example, in the sidebar and in the sliver up bar, we have a leader for the app bar. Sorry, everything flew from my mind. Okay. So simply when we pop, we have a pop value that we're going to provide as the rotation angle. And we're going to listen to it after the push completes, if like there's the navigator push here, and in the then, we listen to it and preserve it in this page so that when we like navigate to the page again, it's still the same rotation. And that's simply how it's done. So, okay, now the gyroscope effect. I forgot my phone. Hopefully no accidents happen. I'm going to share my screen. And try to find the app. Okay. So it's basically when I'm moving my phone, it follows the direction of the movement. And it has this is the effect for it. So we're going to see how we do it now. Okay, the gyroscope effect is the one time we're using a plugin. It's the Sensors Plus. It's a Flutter favorite, I think. And the concept of the gyroscope, using it to change the position, I'm only using the Y and the X axis. And when we move like the phone in the X axis, we have to change the Y offset. So it goes up and down. And when we move it around the Y axis, we have to change the X offset, left and right. And I'm using here a stream builder to listen to the gyroscope event. However, I'm going to show you a little bit another way to do it for improved performance. And this is how the gyroscope effect widget looks like. It's a single widget that you can use it everywhere, and you can either use it right away or you can use it with a builder method. It has the child, the max movable distance to like define how long they will like slide when you move the phone, and an offset multiplier that allows you to make widgets move more than others. Like in the shadow, for example, we're using the same widgets, but the shadow moves further to give like a lighting effect. And we have the option to use a builder that simply provides the offset instead of like having do the offset inside the gyroscope effect widget. And don't hate me, but I'm using Riverpod because don't hate me because I'm going to another subject, not animations, but this is because the stream provider here helps me listen to the stream only once, and it prevents rebuilds and so on. So when I use it like this, it also allows me to do the builder method we saw in the widget by using a consumer. So that way, if we like have complicated widgets, like for example, the pattern, the shadow of it is a backdrop filter, and you don't want to rebuild this a lot of times. So it's better to have it not rebuild as the gyroscope event is firing. And this way, we can just call the builder and provide it with the offset and use the widget with it. Or otherwise, for simple children, we can like use an animated position if we're in a stack or something. This is the child usage. You simply provide it with a child. And when you have a child builder, you have the offset. And the recipe image here has, okay, the shadow is actually using this. Okay, has a tween animation builder that uses this offset to change the shadow of the image. Okay, now for an alternative where we don't have access to a gyroscope, instead of like canceling the gyroscope effect altogether, we can use a mouse region widget in Flutter to listen to the mouse location and change the offset of the shadow in the same way, but listening to the pointer instead. So similar to the gyroscope effect, I'm using a mouse region effect widget that has like similar properties. So you can like wrap both of them with an adaptive widget that displays this widget for web and the other for mobile devices, and so on. I simply have, I find the alignment from the offset from where this is the mouse region widget. It has an on enter, on hover, and on exit with callbacks that I listen to the position where the mouse enters or hovers and change the offset based on it, and then provide it to the builder the same way. So exactly the same usage as the gyroscope effect, but a mouse region effect. Okay, so we built this demo. I hope I didn't take so much time. In conclusion, I want to share with you my personal opinion about how you can like take animations to the next level. It's in my opinion a lot of attention to details. Like with the hero animation, you have to like see that it's when it's popping, it's snapping, so there's something wrong. So those details ruin the animation sometimes. So you have to go a step further and do a lot of like details looking. And the scroll direction, I could have like made the animation the same way in either directions, but it wouldn't have seemed like how it seems now. It would be better. And also with animations, it's important to take care of performance. I actually I'm using a lot of tickers, a lot of animation controllers, and I was so glad to see it on the web working like very smoothly. This is live now, not debug. And so you have to like take care of rebuilds, know which ones, like the backdrop effect shouldn't be rebuilt a lot, and also take care of responsiveness. Flutter gives you the ability to do this cross-platform, so you have the power to make it look amazing on every screen. Thank you very much for listening. You can see the live demo or the source code. The source code, don't judge the source code. I like this. The last push was like 5 minutes before the talk, so I'm gonna like update the README and do some comments, but you can check it out anyway. Yeah, thank you. Do you have time for questions?
If you have any questions for Roa, please ask now.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, how did you find the perfect balance between over animating a view instead of trying to figure out how many animations to put inside a single view to make it look good instead of like overdoing it?
Okay, so I'm holding my phone all the time. I'm using it. I build it. I look at it a lot, and I imagine myself in the place of the user. If a lot of things are popping, and for example, that's really a good question. If you see here, or let me show you in the phone. I wanted to, like, the ingredients list animates only once. That's a perfect example because I didn't want to rebuild the ingredients every time the user scrolls back up. It wouldn't be a good user experience. So it's like trial and error and putting yourself in the place of the user. I hope I answered you. Anytime. Yeah.
Are there any packages yet, or did you create a package to supply, for example, like the animated list? I think that's something you could use over multiple projects. And change too much of the cards when you have a basic look how it looks. You could reuse it again and again.
Yeah, I didn't create, but I want to create something. But it's really it's too simple to be a package actually, as it is now. But it can be like as you mentioned, customized and a lot of options for animating the lists. It could be made. It would be good. So it's in the plan.
But one last question.
Yeah, sure.
You use the interpol for the kind of staggered animation.
Yeah.
There's also a package that's like super advanced about that. And do you have any thoughts on maybe when the interpol gets outgrown and that package is helpful? Like how far can that interpol take you?
Not so far actually, because sometimes you want to like chain animations and you like might use a future delayed to run the animation after the one finishes. This time it would be good to have like a package, but I wanted to do this as minimally as possible and using what Flutter provides. So
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Once more, thanks.
Thank you.
Ron.
Thank you. Thank you, Amina. Thanks a lot.
They can find you at the venue to ask your
Okay.
questions, right? Ask their questions.
Yeah, sure. Come, I'm here 2 days. I got done with my talk, and I'm here to listen to whatever you have. I'm rested now.
Awesome. Cool. We will carry on later on with Alessio's talk. So have a break, and we will catch you later on.
Okay. I forgot I was attached.
Okay. Dominic, what you taking care
It
of?
just didn't. It didn't take a lot of time.
No, you had time. I told you, like,
It's over.
no rush.
Okay, I will go downstairs. Good job. It was a really great talk. As I told you, the animation
Thank
is really rapid. So come on. Okay, I'll catch up with you.
Awesome. I'm gonna wait for your presentation.
Also,
Really?
Yeah, because you're talking about APIs, and I skipped it because of time. And I would say just go back and watch Rose talk.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Let me just.
how do you feel?
Amazing. Okay, I felt like I was there forever, so I didn't take time.
No. I started to. I wasn't here when you started because I went to see Mike,
Okay.
and I was very nervous. So I came here. You were already going very, very calmly, very nicely. Nice.
Thank you. I wasn't calm on the inside.
So good. This was so good. Yes, and it looks amazing. Like, okay, I have homework now.
You know, the demo of the animation, I did it like 1 hour before the
Seriously?
in After Effects, and I was like, I'm trying to remember how to use After Effects. It's been so long, so.
Oh my gosh! But no, this was really amazing. You did an
Thank you.
amazing job. So,
Thanks a lot.
congrats with your first talk. Yeah. Now you can relax.
Nice.
Ever.
Super.
Alessio, good luck, and I'll see you later.
Okay, I'm gonna pack.
Do you
Let's
have-
go out together.
Yeah.
If I don't forget anything. This is my coffee.
Need help, Bill?
What's the bird? Hi everyone again. Nice to see you all in this beautiful room. This time, this will be Alessio talking about Flutter architecture components and Pokemon app. So give it up to Alessio and have fun.
Thank you, everyone. How are you doing? Good. So today we talk about architecture. I know it's a very delicate and controversial topic, so please come here with open-minded and open heart, because it will be, I don't know, like interesting, I guess, or I hope so. So before we talk about architecture, let me show you this Pokemon app, and don't expect my app to be as cool as the previous speak about animation. I didn't do anything on UI. This is just a demo app that it's built on top of the Flutter template skeleton, and I use it for mainly talk about architecture. So first, I'll show you the app, which it happens when I click that button. So this app doesn't do much more than showing a list of Pokemon. So as you saw, as we enter the app, there is a fetch. It's actually working in real time now with the Pokemon Open API. And it fetch one Pokemon. So I usually think about this app that I could have this app installed in 2 or 3 devices. And therefore, when I fetch, I always add a new Pokemon, because the other device could have just added or caught a new Pokemon. I think about this app as a Pokédex, so something that when I catch a Pokemon, I will add it here. And then I can remove a Pokemon, like you see. As I said, when I refresh, you always add a new Pokemon. So I can see, for instance, 3 Pokemons. And when I enter the Pokemon, then I can see the details. So all the information that they come from the server, I trim them down, and some of them are shown here on the UI. I also, let me show you how I do the error as well. So now I have an artificial error. So whenever I try to add a Pokemon, because I think maybe I'm catching now a Pokemon and I want to communicate this, then the error is just shown a very simple snack bar that pops up. And I add these 3 buttons here to facilitate, because I'm using the simulator, so to facilitate my talk. But you can think about that you will just add, it could be a to-do app for the list, so you will add a new list or remove a list. Or architecture-wise, it could be messaging app, so you're adding a new message or deleting a message. It could be an e-commerce. I think this architecture is flexible enough to cover maybe most of the applications out there. So that given, now I will remove the error, and instead I will enable some artificial delay. So I added 3 seconds artificial delay on any operation that we have in this app, because I want to kind of see it a little bit slow down what's going to happen. So when I enter, as you saw, there was no Pokemon. Then there is the 3 Pokemon that I had before, which are fetched by the local database. And then there is also the fetch to the server that he had the 4th Pokemon. Did you notice that? Okay. Then when I see the detail of a Pokemon, as you can see, before they were of course immediate, but now with the 3 seconds delay, we can see that there is the fetch from the database, and then they're shown on the UI. The same when I remove a Pokemon, it takes a little bit before the operation is done, and then the Pokemon get removed. Please note that while I remove a Pokemon, the application remains fully functional, so I can see the detail of another Pokemon. Let me show you again. If I see the detail of this, when I enter the detail again, as you notice, now they are not fetched anymore. So they're kept in memory, cached. This is a choice you can do. So now these 2 Pokemon, for instance, they always are in memory, the details, I mean. And what's going to happen if I remove the first, because it always removes the first, I can clearly use the rest of the app with no operation and interrupt my flow. So if this would be an e-commerce app, you could do anything you want. And meanwhile, the kind of background operation will continue. The same 3 operation that I have on the UI with the three buttons are also, I hide them in a kind of settings menu, because I want to symbolize here that they could be also kind of background operation. They could come not from the UI, but they could come via an SMS, for instance. They could come from Firebase. They could come with a push notification, and still your application should be working. So let's see what's going to happen. So here I have my Charmander, which is the only Pokemon in the list. Let's see what's going to happen if someone, which is me, but not from the UI, delete it while I'm looking at it. Because of course, you are doing maybe a very complex operation. You are filling a form and it takes time, but for whatever reason, it's an auction or something like that, the auction is closed. So it's useless to let the user to still continue to fill the form when you know already that it's pointless. So you can still, your UI can still be reactive and communicate to the user that this operation now is pointless for you to complete. Clear? Okay, I take it as a yes. So I made this presentation into 4 parts. So there is an intro, then there is a part about the state management, because I can't talk about architecture if I don't touch state management. Then there is a core part which is about architecture. And last but not least, there is an outro where I'm going to tell you which one is the best state management you can use. So how it started? We have Philip here. So I don't know if you recognize, it's the same guy in both the pictures. Philip was in the Flutter team, for someone that doesn't know. And now he's not in the Flutter team anymore. So I really consider him very precious, because now he can give his personal opinion, which are very interesting. But nevertheless, how he started. So he was on stage in Google I/O in the summer, Google I/O 2018, on stage with Matt, and there they presented Block, business logic of components. I assume everyone here is familiar with Block. So it was presented there. There is the source in this presentation. So if you click, you can just watch the video. It's very interesting. I recommend to watch both the videos if you don't know them already. And they introduced Block, and the community was very, very happy, because the Flutter community was already asking some reference to how to manage the state of an app, and Block came in. But then, in 1 year later, in 2019, on the same stage, the same summer, actually, 1 year later, in the summer, on the same stage, the same two guys, they kind of reading the very same thing that they did in the first speech, but this time they show to us how to use provide. And it's extremely interesting to me, because they also recommend not to use the provider package as released or published by Google, because Google had their own provider package. But they instead recommended to use a package created by this young, very talented French guy, Remy. I don't know if he's here, but definitely it's in this conference. Hi, Remy, wherever you are. So they recommended to use that package. And they explained...
Unfortunately, we have to make a technical break just to
sure.
change mics. If you could just put it in your pocket.
Sure.
And we're gonna put it here.
Great.
Sorry about that.
Is it any better now? Good? Okay. So I truly believe that in between these two videos or two speeches in 1 year, a big misunderstanding happened. And that's actually when I jumped into Flutter, or I started to look into Flutter. I was working in Nokia back then, and then I kind of couldn't figure it out what was the way to go until the second video came out in 2019, and I really liked what the guys showed there. And this is how it's going nowadays. We have provider river pod set state, inherited widget, redux, block, get it, getx, triple pattern, and much, much, much more. There is the source from the official site. You can see there. If you don't like, there is my
made Mike comparison, which compares all the packages that we have for state management solution. And he has also quite a nice metrics on what, like for kind of ranking the packages. I don't know if you're familiar with this chart, but there is the source here as well. As you can see, unfortunately, number one is GetX. How many of you use GetX? Security? Just joking, it's fine. So let's talk about state management briefly. So what is state management? Obviously, it's a way to manage the state, but let's define state a little bit. This is the best I could come up with, which is that a state, it's all the info that you need to build or rebuild your UI, anything you need. And when I mean rebuild, I don't mean that you only build the UI for the first time, or you build the UI in the next step when you move from one state to the next state. But you rebuild the UI also when in between two user sessions. So like if the user log out and log in again, you want to recreate the same state that you had before. And this is what it's a state. It's very abstract, but I hope it's clear to everyone. It's like what you need to build the UI. There are, if you don't know, two kinds of states. One is ephemeral state and one is application state. Ephemeral state, it's defined, it can be defined as, you can see the picture here, as the state that it's kind of all included into one widget, that it's nested into one widget. And for that kind of state, which is ephemeral state, set state and stateful widgets are totally fine. You don't need anything else. Set state is fine for ephemeral states. Examples of ephemeral states are, for instance, if you have a view pager and then you want to know which one is the current view. So the state that keeps track of the index of the current view. No other part of your application needs to know anything about that. It's only the view pager. And therefore, this is an ephemeral state. Then there is application state, where you actually need state management techniques. And this happens in, I guess, two cases. One is when your state needs to be sharing between 2 or 3 or more views. So then you need to kind of move the state away from your view and put it into another class, which is usually called a state holder because it holds the state. And or when you have only one view, but you still want, maybe the state gets so complex that you want to move it into another class to handle it better. And this allows you also to recreate the state in between user sessions. When I talk about views in this context, or widgets, they are the same things to me. So widgets, views, or pages, they're the very same thing. This applies to full screen pages, or it applies to part of a page, which is a widget that maybe it's complex enough to require an application state. Or maybe it has part of the state that is shared in between 2 or 3 widgets. Then there is simple state management, which is what Philip and Matt showed in the second video that I mentioned before. It's also called pragmatic state management. It's the only one that is officially documented in Flutter.dev. I was a little bit lost when I started to look into all these state management packages, and therefore I went back to the only official source that it's for Flutter. I liked things to come from official and you need someone to coordinate. You need someone to tell to the builders which material to use, how to use it, what it is its purpose, and someone that design the temple, that design which parts are and what do they do and what is their purpose. So this is what we mean with architect, even for code. So it's the structure and it's the design of a system. This is very general, very abstract, but it works. So we go into an example of what we mean for an application, but this is in the very general level. Why would you need an architecture? Is there anyone here who doesn't use an architecture? Okay, good. So I guess you understand the reasoning behind it. So mobile applications are different from, for instance, monolithic desktop applications. So mobile applications, they're made out of parts, or as Android think about them, components, which can be torn down by the system at any time independently from each other. And you need your app to still work if one of them go down and then it's started up again. And the architecture is what it helps you to achieve that. It's based on 4 principles, or if you use it, you will find 4 principles. And you want to use it because then your code is more maintainable, it's more robust, it can be better tested, and it's scalable. So I guess these are clear for all of one here, but like maintainable, it means you can refactor the code or change the code very easily. Robust, that you don't have much bugs, especially in production. Scalable, if new features are added, it shouldn't matter much if there are 2 more features or 20 more features. The code should scale, and testable, because when you isolate part of the app, then it's easier to test. And then there is some principles that when you basically have an architecture, then you will see them. They come out of the code, and you can find them in the code. So one is the separation of concern, which means that you want to make sure that a class doesn't do 2 things. You want to make sure that each class does one thing and one thing only, and it's well done. So the concern, the responsibilities for each class are separated. Then you want to drive your UI from your data models, and possibly to persist the data models. You want to have, for each data type, a single source of truth, and you want to be very clear where it's the single source of truth, who's responsible for it, who owns it. And then we will see we have also unidirectional data flow, which means that your data must go from the UI all the way down to the bottom layer of your app, and then come back to the UI in one way. As we said, architecture, it's also structure. So first thing you want to do, you want to structure your code. I recommend you to use feature folders, but there are alternatives. Anything works as well as long as it's well documented. So in this case, for instance, I built this Pokemon demo on top of the template. So there is the settings and the localization were part of the template. And then there is the Pokemon feature I added also a network layer and a core. Rule of thumb, it's simple. Like if you want to remove a feature, it should be as simple as you remove one folder. If your app doesn't do that, you need to refactor that immediately. Yes, the template. So I may be wrong, but when I looked into the template, I liked it a lot because the template, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it was introduced with Android 2.5, the new template or skeleton template, and it's the one that there is the dark theme and light theme, and it's basically kept in memory. And they use a setting controller, which is implemented with a change notifier. And that's basically what show me that they hint, what they hint, it's an MVC, model view controller. I hope everyone of you heard about this. This is the most general architecture you can think of. And it's nice because it's general enough that you can use it in many different cases. So it's made of 3 layers. Oh, one thing I forgot. Sorry, I have to go back a second. Not only I looked into the template, but because I was a little bit lost in 2018 when I started to look into architecture, and then 2019. So I'm an Android developer. I have an Android developer background. So the only thing that I really needed was a reference, because there are so many packages that they tell you just do this, but they don't explain you why would you actually do what you're supposed to do. So I used Android architecture component as a reference for this architecture, and it became very nice later on, because these pictures are basically taken from Android architecture component. Now they're rewriting all of it, as I could see in the last months, because now they have compose. So now that they have composed, Android architecture is getting even more similar to what we use already in Flutter, because now they're also composing the UI. So for me, it was a real match. So it was easy to use all the ideas from Android architecture component that they still work for Flutter, and they should work for us as well. So we have 3 layers. There is the UI layers, the domain layer, and the data layer. The views and the controllers, they are in the UI layer. The domain layer, it's optional, and it's mainly use cases. And then there is the data layer that are repositories and data sources. Domain layer is optional, so I'm not going to touch it for this presentation, but I'm going to have one slide a little bit later on. So the views. The views, they want to do, of course, everyone, I hope it's clear to everyone what we mean here with views. So they are stateful or stateless widgets. We saw before that the stateless are for the ephemeral state, and the stateful are, sorry, the opposite. The stateful are for the ephemeral state, and the stateless are for the application state. Because the moment that you take your state away from a stateful widget, you can use a stateless one instead. Your state, it's somewhere else, it's in the controller. The purpose of the views is mainly 2 purposes. One, you want to display the data on the screen. So whatever it's in your data layer, you want to represent it on the screen. And then you want to capture the user interaction when the user click the UI. And so we can say that it's a visual representation of the app state from the data layer directly. And last but not least, when we have this build method, we want to build as fast as possible. We don't want to do any type of logic there. If you see any type of parsing, any type of, I don't know, changing the text, any type of calculation, you're doing it wrong. Take anything away from your build method. Your build method must just execute as fast as it can. No logic. And we need to rethink the way we see the views, at least if you come from this imperative way, like Android is. So instead of having, I don't know, a text view, and to set the text of the view, which is imperative, we need to instead think in a declarative way. So we declare the state somewhere else, and the state update, the UI will rebuild. Nothing to say to the UI. I use this metaphor of the movies, because we all know that the movies, when we go and watch a movie, the movie, it's a fluid experience, obviously, but we know that it's 24 frames per second. So they're just pictures instead. They're just pictures shot to us very, very, very fast. And we need to have the same way that we think the UI. The UI is just a series of pictures. Even when there is an animation, the animation is very fluid. It's just a series of pictures built one after each other. So the good model for this, it's a finished state machine. I assume everyone here knows what is a finished state machine. And there is the very famous function that the UI is a function of the state. So for instance, in my demo app, I have a state 0, which is when I enter the app, before I do anything, I just see that there is no Pokemon. You have no Pokemon, I'm very sorry for you. This is my state 0. Then one Pokemon come in at one point, either I catch it or I refresh, and this is my state 1. Then 2 Pokemon come in, this is my state 2, and this goes on and on and on. It's almost an infinite list. There are 1,141 Pokemon in the open API at the moment, so it's quite a long list. Okay, so either finite state machine or infinite state machine, it doesn't make much of a difference. But then there is also the loading, which is of course not the same state. So I can go from my state 0 to my state 0 loading, and from my state 0 loading, I can go to the state 1 very easily. Nothing, something is happening, and then there is one Pokemon. And the states for the loading, they're all equivalent. So for each one of the states, I have also the loading. And then last but not least, I have also the error. For each one of them, the error, it's another state. It's not something that comes on top of it. It's a separate state. When you draw the UI, you draw an empty list with an error. And this is, again, a kind of infinite list. So I have all these states, and I can move from one to the next according to the rules of a finite state machine. Clear? Good. So UI state, as you saw, the UI has the loading, he has the error, and he has the Pokemon list. So you want a class, which I call the Pokemon UI state, which contains all of them. And it's very important that this class is immutable, because you want to manipulate this class to move from one state to the next in an immutable way. So you will have a copy method that it will just change only one of the elements of your UI, of your state or UI state, without changing the other ones at the same time. And so it's immutable, and it's very simple class. And then there is when there is the list, it's not a list of Pokemon, but it's a list of Pokemon item UI state, which is this other simple class, because when I fetch a Pokemon, there is a lot of information there, but in the initial page, not in the detail page, but in the initial page, I don't show all the information. So there is no point to bring there all that information. You need to trim down your classes to only what is needed by the UI. And this is, if you implement and if you think your UI this way, it's very nice, because when you have a combined feature, like, I don't know, maybe if I am registered in this application and if I am a premium user, I could like the Pokemon. There could be, I have this feature that I can like them. Then you would have this information here as a combined information based on the two items that you have in this class. Then there are the controllers. The controllers, they are, we saw before that they hold the UI state. So that's one of their responsibility. And then they also handle the user interaction. So when someone click the UI, and then this information is given to the controller know what to do with that. And they return back to the UI the state for consumption. And then they are the one also that they manipulate. So they change the data model. Controllers are the one responsible for changing your data set. So for instance, this is how the Pokemon controller is implemented. It's a change notifier, as you can see. He owns the state, so he has a reference of the state. And he has all the operation that I can do on the UI. So I can create, delete, and refresh. And then there is, of course, one dispose. And it's listening to the changes of the dataset through the repositories watch all. Then there are the repositories. What they are like classes where your data is stored. And they actually are very important, because what they do, they are the one that they orchestrate for each data type in between the data sources. So you will have more than one data source, or even zero if you want. And they will orchestrate. So they will be the one deciding where you get your data first. Like, do you want to have an offline first approach? Do you want to have an always online approach? These are the classes where you do this type of choices, and the one that you give responsibility for this type of choices. They have CRUD operations, which are one shot. So you can create, read, update, and delete your data set. And then when your data change, you need to have some operation for that as well. So if you look at the class, for instance, there are all of them, all the CRUD operation. And then I expose two methods, which are stream, because you want to have the reactiveness in your application. But I use stream here because I guess that's what most of you are familiar with. But I personally prefer to use value notifier here. But that's a matter of choice. The important is that whenever the repository changes the data, it can be brought back to whoever is listening. And the repositories, they expose the immutable data, trim down. So if the Pokemon before the repository, he has a huge list of fields. After the repository, he exposes only what the UI need, nothing else. And they know the repositories, which one is your single source of truth, which is per repo. So different repositories. So if I have a movies repository and a songs repository, they can have different single source of truth, and it's well defined there. And they contain business logic. Then data sources are very, I guess, easy classes. So they basically can be database or network. Usually, by default, a repository always will have a local data source and a remote data source, a list. And then they expose the one-shot CRUD operations, like the repositories. And then it's important that no one else in your application access the data sources but your repositories. So all the communication that manipulate your data, you go through the repositories. Now let's see how this works throughout all our architecture. So first of all, when I click to refresh the Pokemon, so as you can see, there is a floating action button that basically needs to have access to the Pokemon controller to tell it that we want to refresh your Pokemon data. And this happens through provider. So, sorry, through Riverpod. So there is because my controller is a change notifier, there is this class called change notifier provider that will give or will expose the change notifier, which is my controller, to the UI. And the UI needs only to have this ref and then be able to read it, because these are UI actions. So you don't want to rebuild your UI. You want only to have this read action. So you don't rebuild the UI, but you just click and then do an action like refresh or add a Pokemon or remove a Pokemon and so forth. So I hope this is pretty simple and straightforward. You have a controller provider which is global, and then you can access it because it's global. You can access it anywhere in your UI and just read it and trigger the action. And this is how the first part of the communication goes. When the controller does something, okay, we want to refresh the data set, so the Pokemon, then it does that. And at one point, the controller is notified that, okay, now the data set is refreshed. Here it is. The controllers, they need to communicate this back to the views, to the UI. And this is how they do it. So on the controller, as you can see, when we receive a new data set, the new list of Pokemon, we update the state, which is just a copy because the state is immutable, and then we just notify the listener, nothing else. We update the state, I move from state 3 to state 4, just rebuild yourself. On the UI side, here it's on my Pokemon page. This time I watch to the provider because I want to rebuild my widget, which is a consumer widget, so it consumes the UI. And I don't want, because if you remember, my state is full inclusive. It has the loading, it has the error, and it has the list. I don't want to, this is only for my Pokemon list widget. I don't want to rebuild this part of the UI every time, for instance, the app is loading or it stops loading, because the list didn't change in that case. So I have the select. So this is something that Riverpod allow me to do, so I can just listen to the state of my controller. And in between all the elements of the state, I can only listen to the changes in the Pokemon list. When the list change, this UI will rebuild. So if something else in the state change, this UI doesn't rebuild. Then let's see how the controllers communicate to the data model. So when we say that you need to refresh the Pokemon list, also the controller need to forward this information to the repositories. And this is as simple as the method that the controller said that now I'm loading, and now refresh the repository, refresh the data set, and we catch the exception. So if there are some errors, we catch them here. And if you see, this is the same code that I showed before, but this time I also show that we pass the repository to the controller when the provider is created. He creates the Pokemon controller and he passes the repository. This is dependency injection. I know Remy doesn't like to use Riverpod or to be promoted as being able to do dependency injection, but it can do that as well. So you just read through the ref, you just read from the Pokemon repository provider, and this will provide you the repository. So you just, it's the very same as we get it, you could do it from the registry and you get the repository from there. And last but not least, the repository does whatever it does when it needs to refresh the state, and then it gives the information back to the controller. So the controller needs to actually watch all the changes in the repository, and then, as we saw before, notify the listener. I think this is fairly easy. unidirectional data flow. So I click, I want to refresh the Pokemon. This information from the view is given to the controller, and the controller tell to the repositories that we want to change this data set. The repository does the change, then through the data sources, then it persists it. And only when it's persisted, then the operation is concluded and it's positive, and then it's given back with a new data set that's returned to the controller, and from the controller notify the view that now there is a new data set, please rebuild yourself. This is called unidirectional data flow because it goes all the way, the events, the user events, they go all the way from the UI layer to the data layer, and then from the data layer, they bounce back to the UI layer, the data. The only part that I skipped, which was optional, is the domain layer. And here you want to have, you want to do two things here. You want to reuse business logic. So if you are, for instance, if you have a data formatter and you want to format your date in some way, you will have a format the date use case here. Or if you want to do something a little bit more complex, like if you have a bank transaction and then you have the parties, but your transaction repository doesn't actually list the names of the parties, just list the IDs, and you want to map the IDs to names, for instance, you would need some classes that they can handle both the repositories. They're like repository managers. So this is very good because when you start to use cases, you extract all this simple function into one place, then you can modify them even later on very easily and without extra changes. So to conclude, I hope I'm in time, yes. There are many different architectures. Some of them are better than the others, but we need to define what do we mean with better, and we need to understand based on which metrics do we define better architectures. For me, it was simplicity. I like things to be very simple, so I think that this approach with RiverPod and Change Notifier, it's extremely simple, and it's easy to follow, and it works beautifully. And unfortunately, which one is the best state management package? It depends. It depends a lot. So what I saw and what I see is that architecture is never talked in the team or in the company, or rarely talked. What I see is that when you enter a team, then you're like, why do we use this architecture? If you ask that question, sometimes you don't even get answers. And what I see sometimes is that not all the team is on the same page on why this architecture was chosen and based on which metrics and based on which reasoning and all of that. So I honestly think that code is a reflection of my mental model and your mental model, and it must be a reflection of your mental model. You need to understand the code that you work against every day, and you need to that this code match your mental model. If it doesn't, then you will have difficulties to work with this code. So I recommend everyone to have clear why you're using the architecture you're using, and maybe to try even 2 or 3 different architecture and see what works best for you. There isn't one that is best for everyone, but what I presented here today, it's simple, it's scalable, and it works very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great job. We have a couple minutes just for a few questions. I don't know if you want to take some questions.
Yeah.
So we have just a couple of minutes, so maybe 1 or 2 questions if anybody has some. I see one hand raised. All right. I'm going to pass the mic to you, and if you could just use the mic to ask a question.
Yeah, hi. One question. I'm also using RiverPod and the feature first architecture. How you handle scoping of providers? So I think I'm asking myself often when I make a feature and I make a provider globally, how I can be sure that no other in my team access the provider from another feature. So I have to make it private, then I have it to write in the UI file. So how you handle this? Or what is your recommendation?
So providers are global. So honestly, if they're global, there is not much you can do about it. I expose them as global. I know it's tricky in a sense. I also would like to be defensive in that case, but the way that you go, it's very kind of like it's a big huge effort to make them private, but then you can still work around it. So I keep them global. They're global variables, and that's what they are. If you follow me on Twitter, I like this meme, global everywhere. That's what we're gonna have after Riverpod, and it's something that I guess we need to live with it.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. I will try to get the second.
Hi. So speaking on the subject of global and final providers, what happens and how do you handle when, let's say that you have a desktop application and you want to show two Pokemon lists side by side? How do you make them have independent states from each other?
Not so sure if I get your question. Like the state is clearly shared in between two instances of the same application.
Yeah, so let's say that I want to see my Pokédex and another user's Pokédex, or with some filtering, or just have two different lists where I do different interactions and have them not share the same.
I would have to try that myself. I don't know how to answer that.
Thank you very much. I think this will conclude the presentation. Maybe if anybody has some short question, we can just take it. But I don't. Yeah, here's one.
Hi. Okay, when you use this domain layer, so use cases, do you recommend to use it like for all features, or just use it for these particular ones when you have like really complex business logic?
So I usually start to use it only when I need it, but in practice, what it happens is that I use it quite often. So you can go both ways. It's I see use cases as kind of very simple and specialized functions. So sometimes even I have only I still create a use case even when I use it only in one part of the code, because then it helps me later on to just change this use case, to tweak it a little bit, and I don't have to touch anything else. But you can go both the way, and I think it's by need. When you see that it becomes too complex, then extract it into a use case for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alessio. That was a really nice, insightful talk, maybe disruptive in a way. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Now there will be a lunch break. After the break, there will be a group photo, and we see each other at 1 p.m. in the same room. So we hope you will have a good time. And give it up again to Alessio for this amazing talk.
Thank you. How do you switch this on?
I think we don't care about it. Oh, I just need to tell them to charge the battery, right?
Yeah, I liked it. I was going to ask.
Thank you. Did you get offended that your picture was there? Okay, I'll call you.
Hey, Alex.
Nice to meet you.
Talk. Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah. So my question with regards to the.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get pictures.
Yeah, the thing is, so I've had troubles in our own app where we have, like, I'm trying to build this generic master detail view controller, right? Where you have on a desktop, you have on the left, you have a list, you select an item in the list, you have a detail view on the right. And I wanted to make it within the same. Yes, exactly. And then I have different tabs. So like one tab for like chats, in our case, one tab for like projects, it's a project management software. And I wanted to make this generic so I can use the same like master detail widget and just with builders make that this master detail view should have this list, this detail view should have this list. And I found that to be a problem with Riverpod because it's like global by nature, since it's not in the widget tree. They started sharing state. So like I selected the second item, and now when I switch tab to a different collection, it's still like the second item selected because both tabs like share the same state of which item is selected in that specific list view.
Let me ask you one question. How is your mental model? Because you see that you have one main page on the left where you switch, and then you have a list on the right, and then when you switch, change. You show different lists.
Yeah, so it's like I have a list on the left, and I have a detail view on the right, and then I have a sidebar which is a menu. So like when I switch features, it switches out both the master and the detail.
Yeah. But how do you see this? Is this as a one full page, or do you see this as this is my page and then the menu as it's out?
Yeah, kind of like that. Right. Yeah. So like when you go to a different tab, it changes the route, and it recreates the the master detail.
If I think it this way, okay, let's say the detail page, you could add it inside any item, like I did for the formula, right? So you could just click on an item and maybe see it. So we can forget it, right? So what you have after that, it's only a list of something, and when you switch something, you go to another list, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so it will be very same as in the phone to go to different pages. So if I have a tab layout at the bottom with 3 tabs,
Exactly.
right? I would just, how would you implement the tab layout? Because you need to implement it the very same way. So with the tab layout, you would implement 3 different lists, and each list would have its own provider or its own river pod, which will keep the cache of its own element.
Yes, exactly, and that's where I run into the problem because so I want to make a generic master detail widget.
Yeah, that I understand. But you need to this generic widget, you need to inject, so you need to pass the river pod, which we can't be inside. It must be outside.
Yeah.
And then you find 3, 4, 5 different providers, and then we inject them, possibly passing them in the constructor to each one of them.
Yeah, that's an idea. That's good.
That's the only way, because you can't. Otherwise, if you nest the provider or river pod inside, then you would need to have some type of generative way that you would just generate always a different one, and then you keep some type of, I don't know, manager that is a pool of providers.
Yeah.
But in your case, you will have maybe 4, 5, 6 side.
Yeah, then I just need to define those outside and inject them in. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, like, it's a global. Like I like the idea, but I have a hard time wrapping around that. For me, global means static. How to make global dynamic? What if I want to make the user define their own tabs, and they can have 3 tabs which are the same data but just have different states?
The more you let
have multiple windows in a desktop application.
The more you let the user to define how many tabs they want to have there, the more you go towards the generative type of approach.
Yeah.
And then you need to go with the generative approach. And then you get globals, which are static but dynamic.
Okay, yeah, you like using globals, which are arrays or dictionaries. Yeah.
Does it answer?
Yeah, for sure. Cool, thanks.
No, I do not have a question. I just want to listen.
No, actually, 2 things. The first one is that.
Did you like it?
Yes, I really like it. And I really wanted to say that with my team, like 1 year before, we were going to begin this Flutter, and we fight to compare with other. We were like 4 developers, 1 architect, Java. He has like 50 years old and 20 years of experience, and he brings almost the same solutions to get the state. And that's what I thought is that sometimes it's like what your team wants, what your team knows, and we're like a really object-oriented developers, and he has a lot of experience as like a Spring Boot applications, and he wrote that okay, we're gonna do like this with controller, with abstract, and we're gonna let this to you, and we have almost the same thing, but with provider. So this is just for us to say that actually we came to the same conclusion, and we came for another you came from Android, he came from Spring Boot,
Yeah.
and actually they know that that work, and we said we know that work. We're with the team acknowledge, and we began and that work and the application was scalable. So just for saying that. And second is like, what is the next step? Because we did we added like interceptors, we actually take all the same approach. We add Dio, we take the interceptor, we take the cache.
Why not to use Dio?
Yes, I use the we use Dio.
Yeah, okay.
We use to use this intercepting to centralize, to manage all the errors, the exceptions. So for you, this is the next step, I think, for this type of architecture.
What do you mean the next step?
So this is because you would add Dio, for example.
Yes.
Or yes.
I use either HTTP or Dio.
Okay.
I use both. Depends.
Okay. The other question is that
Dio, it's big.
yes.
So I'm usually very conservative in my depending. So when I don't need that, I use HTTP straight. If the package. If I need something like introduction or then I go for Dio.
Okay.
I couldn't here touch the network layer,
Yes.
and I couldn't touch the navigation, because otherwise this would have been 2 hours.
But that would be a very good next talk.
Next year.
Yes. The last question was to talk about generative style. So for you, because now, okay, you have this architecture. Now we know that we create a service like that. We create a feature like that.
That's cool.
Okay, so how we can get like code generation to do that? Have you thought about it?
Why would you want that? Yeah, I've been thinking about that many times,
Yes.
but I personally am against code generation.
Okay.
I'm very sorry. So my question is always, why would you want to do that?
Okay.
Why?
It's like really
To code
standardize.
to code faster?
No, to code faster, it's standardized. Like we add service and we generate the same structure, and the
You
team
just copy paste.
just copy paste it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 50 lines of code, copy paste them, empty the methods, take 1 minute.
Okay.
But of course, you can generate that.
No, it's a really good. It's like sometimes it's like simpler.
I use Nation for that.
What do you use?
Nation code generation.
Okay.
Simple templating, just to have some, for example, some view and controller in a standardized way. You can just copy the files with Mason.
You can append hooks and run your build runner only in one directory, which is also quite nice. If you're using with freeze classes, you don't have to rebuild the whole.
Yeah, I forgot to say where my classes is immutable, I could have used priest, so everyone can use it.
Okay. No,
Which is another package from Ruby.
Okay, free just.
Priest.
Thank you
Did I
very
answer
much.
your question?
Huh?
Did I answer
Yes,
your question?
yes. I think that's for me the conclusion is like if you take that's reflect the mental and you can share that with the team, that's gonna work. Actually.
Thank you for your question. And one comment: be careful about code generation, despite what he's gonna say, because what I see a lot is that people tend to invest a lot of time in this kind of abstracting things,
Yes, factoring,
generally
yes.
speaking, right? To kind of simplify your life, but actually, I think you're making it more complex your life, because I like things to be very simple, and I like things to be that I'm in control of, And when I'm working a very complex product at the moment, and it's so abstract that sometimes you try to follow the code and just it vanishes, and you're like, okay, and what do I do now? Because it's like layer on top of layer on top of layer, and some it's abstraction and some it's generative, and it becomes heavy on the developer. So do it when there is a reason. Do it when your mental model, when you first hit a wall that your mental model is not sufficient anymore, and you're like, damn, I really can't this anymore. I can't handle this. And then it's okay. Oh, and then we go for something heavy, but then we go again.
I get it. Thank you very much.
Hey, I just wanted to say hi. I'm the one in Munich with Johanni and Jasper.
Ah, there you are, finally. Okay, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah. I've been in touch with Johanni since I met him in DroidCons.
Yeah, he told me.
Jasper, is linked to Finland because of his wife, so he came to visit years ago.
Yeah.
And we had a nice chat. Still talking about Flutter in 2018, somewhere 2018 or something like that.
Yeah, he's still into Flutter. Yesterday was the last time I talked to Jasper, I guess. Yeah, I just wanted to say hi. Thanks for the talk. It was. Yeah, I liked it very much. Yeah, it was like from the type from everything. I enjoyed it really much. I had one question though.
Sure.
Why change notifier, not state notifier?
So again, one thing that I forgot to say, you can use it. It's
Okay.
like change notifier, value notifier, and state notifier. They all do the same thing. So the difference is that the change notifier, with change notifier, I'm in charge of my notifier.
Yeah, right.
So I just, as you saw, I copy the state and then I notify the listener.
Yeah.
With state notifier, you don't notify the listener, you just copy the state. And then it does it itself. It doesn't make any difference. And value notifier is the very same thing. The state notifier is an implementation of value notifier. So this was a good point I forgot to say that you can use the three of them.
Yeah.
And I personally like to use change notifier and value notifier.
Yeah.
But
oh really? You first? Okay. Oh yeah. I've seen this because I'm always asking myself, okay, why are these guys not using change notifier and not state notifier?
Either for no reason, just because it starts from the official documentation when they use provider and change notifier.
All right.
And because so this is the answer, the real answer. We change, you can use change notify for many different things. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you use it for a repository, which I don't use in this location, okay, but you could use it for a repository.
Yeah.
When you want to notify whoever is listening to the repository, my data set is changed.
Yeah.
You just implement a repository
Yeah.
and change notify.
Yeah.
Okay. Or we value notify.
Yeah.
But not with state notify. You could, of course, but not because the repository doesn't contain a state. So it works very well when you are on the controller view side, because there you have a state, which is the UI state. And for any widget where you have a state. But when you have a repository, you don't really have a state. You just pass data which are not a state.
Yeah, it's the stream. Oh, yeah, it's the stream of data. Right. Yeah. Okay.
So therefore, I got used to use the kind of like the more kind of abstract thing, because then it works anywhere I use it.
Yeah.
But if I would use a state notifier or changes or bug notifier, then when I'm in other places, I would need to go back to use change notifier. But
yeah,
when I use change notifier everywhere, I don't think it's just I use.
Okay.
But it's a matter of taste. You can
Yeah.
use the three of them indifferently.
Okay. So I'm using this to build a template.
Nice.
Send it
Yes.
to you because you don't like it.
Yeah. Go for it.
No, really, thanks. It was great. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You're around the next day.
Yes, let's be in touch and let's chat.
All right, maybe later. All right, so
I tried to PM you on Twitter, but I couldn't. So
that was weird. Yeah,
you PM me. Yeah.
Okay, I just.
So if you PM me, then we have an open chat.
I'll PM you right away. All right, then I'll just get it. Yeah, go on. See you later.
See you later. Alligator. Hello.
So, hi. Yeah, I really enjoyed your talk. I think it's one of the most important things you're talking about, the managing state.
Thank you so much.
Generally, in your applications, do you end up with like one provider containing all of the states, or do you?
I don't use provider. I use Riverpod.
Yeah. Okay. But okay. Do you use one Riverpod for all of your state, or do you like?
No.
How is your granularity?
They're specific. I usually put them next to the controller in the same class. So I have my Pokemon controller.type, which contains both the controller, so the change notifier and the change notifier provider. Because the change notifier provider is usually one or two lines, three lines. When it gets more complex, you still call the other providers, and you can instantiate all of them, but it never gets as complex as it was with provided that you have this widget that contains like 8 other providers.
Yeah, okay.
Do you use Riverpod?
No, I'm going to use it now after.
Lovely. do it because the migration is relatively simple. It should be one or two days max.
I never heard of it.
And after that, it will really simplify your life. No, thanks for you.
Yeah, I have a question about Riverpod because we were wondering about dependency injection.
Yes.
Like using Riverpod injection.
You saw it?
Yes, because now we use block and provider. So if
You use block?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, I think like in our company is like a default choice, and
Who made it?
I don't know. I think it's so
Film is
popular.
made.
Yeah.
We use Qubit buttons.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are two blocks.
Qubit is part of the
Yeah,
block.
yeah.
I also forgot to say that here I meant block the pattern, but then there is just block the package, and not often, not always they're the very same thing. Bigger.
Yeah, we were wondering if like it's okay to use like Gyroscope only for injection and to leave block,
No.
or it should be.
So no, because as I said, Remy doesn't want to even promote Riverpod as a dependency injection tool. So if you want to have a tool for dependency injection, then use Get It by Thomas. Thomas is here around, he's a very good guy, and you get it.
Yeah,
we know that.
we use
We
it
also
in
use
the all of our applications.
Yeah, so if you use
It's
Get
very
It, you use for dependency injection. Then there is no reason to replace it with Riverpod at all. Because Riverpod is much, well, it's like you would want to a Ferrari just to go from home to market and back. It's a little bit too much.